Escape from freedom is not into freedom, but from freedom. Erich Fromm. When was the last time you truly stopped to ask yourself, why do I believe this? We live in an age where endless information is at our fingertips, yet genuine critical thinking is fading into the background. Comfort has replaced curiosity, and belonging has become more important than truth. Many would rather blend in than face the discomfort of questioning, because real freedom demands responsibility, and responsibility can feel heavy. As Carl Jung observed, people will do almost anything to avoid facing their own souls. But without the courage to think for ourselves, we quietly surrender our independence to algorithms, group opinions, and cultural noise. The real danger isn't that we're uninformed. It's that we've stopped wanting to know. If you believe truth is worth seeking, hit subscribe, drop a like, and share your thoughts. Your perspective matters here. Freedom sounds beautiful until you realize what it truly demands of you. Erich Fromm, in Escape from Freedom, observed that many people do not actually want freedom because freedom is not just the right to choose. It is the burden of owning those choices, of taking full responsibility for your life without hiding behind someone else's decisions. When you think for yourself, you step out of the mental comfort zone you've carefully built, and you begin to face the raw uncertainty of not knowing where each choice might lead. It means questioning the beliefs that have been with you since childhood, beliefs that once felt like the foundation of your identity. This is not an easy path because the moment you begin to peel away what was given to you, you encounter the unsettling silence of your own mind. A space without ready-made answers, without the safety net of the group. To avoid this discomfort, many unconsciously escape from freedom by merging their thoughts with the crowd, handing over their inner compass to leaders, communities, or ideologies that promise certainty. It feels safer to let others think for you, to follow rules already laid out, to stay inside the lines, because stepping outside means you alone must bear the consequences. Carl Jung, from a different angle, described the same human avoidance in his concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we do not want to see. Independent thinking often brings us face to face with that shadow. You may discover that a value you defend so passionately is rooted in fear, or that an opinion you've held for years was built on falsehood. Such realizations threaten the ego, so the natural instinct is to turn away. And yet, turning away does not erase the truth. It only buries it deeper, where it quietly shapes your reactions and decisions. In today's world, this avoidance has become even more insidious because the illusion of freedom is stronger than ever. Social media tells you that you are free to express yourself, but in reality, much of what you see, believe, and even feel is pre-selected by algorithms. They feed you ideas that match your current worldview, reinforcing your sense of being right, while quietly narrowing the range of what you will even consider. You might think you're exploring the world, but you are often only walking the same well-worn path designed for you by invisible systems. This is why so many people ask themselves, why do I lose focus? Or why am I easily influenced, without realizing that their mental environment is engineered to keep them distracted and dependent on external approval. Think of a time when you felt pressure to agree with everyone around you, even though something inside whispered that they were wrong. Maybe it was in a meeting at work, where challenging the majority might have risked your position. Maybe it was among friends discussing a controversial topic, where disagreement could mean social isolation. In those moments, the choice to remain silent feels like self-protection, but over time, it erodes your confidence in your own judgment. You begin to default to the group, not because they are always right, but because it is easier than standing alone. This is the quiet trade we make: comfort for clarity, acceptance for authenticity. The real danger is not that you are uninformed, but that you stop wanting to know. When the urge to question fades, you become a passive consumer of beliefs, shaped by whatever voices are loudest. This realization opens a new path, one that asks you to stop and consider. If tomorrow every opinion you hear disappeared, how many of your beliefs would remain? Would you still know where you stand, or would you find yourself searching for someone else to tell you what to think? The courage to face that question is where independent thinking begins, and it is also where freedom stops being an abstract ideal and becomes a living responsibility. It is the moment you step beyond the illusion of safety and accept that the weight of your own mind is yours to bear. And yet, even when an individual is willing to do this, the reality is that the very structures we live within are not built to encourage it. They are designed to suppress it. Erich Fromm reminds us that political, economic, and cultural systems maintain obedience because obedience is easy to manage. Critical thinking is dangerous in such an environment because it disrupts the predictable flow of control. It asks uncomfortable questions, it exposes weaknesses in authority, and it refuses to accept "because we said so" as a sufficient answer. This is why those who hold power often prefer a population that reacts rather than reflects, that repeats rather than questions. Noam Chomsky, in Manufacturing Consent, reveals how mainstream media operates within this logic. Information is not presented as a neutral landscape to explore. It is filtered, framed, and repeated until it shapes the boundaries of acceptable thought. You may believe you are making a free choice, but that choice often exists only within an invisible box, the safe frame pre-approved by those who benefit from your agreement. You see it in politics, where debates are reduced to two simplified options while more nuanced perspectives are ignored. You see it in advertising, where products are linked to emotional needs you didn't know you had. You even see it in cultural narratives, where certain stories are elevated and others quietly erased. Fromm would say this is not accidental. It is a form of conditioning, and the conditioning starts early. John Taylor Gatto, an outspoken critic of modern schooling, argued that education often trains students to comply rather than to question. Memorization is rewarded, curiosity is redirected, and standardized testing ensures that thinking happens inside the lines. This pattern doesn't disappear after graduation. It deepens. In the workplace, compliance is often a currency for advancement. The person who challenges an inefficient policy risks being labeled difficult, while the one who quietly accepts it is praised as a team player. Over time, the silent learn to stay silent, and the curious learn to disguise their questions as small talk. In such an environment, asking why becomes an act of rebellion. Imagine standing in a meeting where every head is nodding along to a decision you know is flawed. You feel the urge to speak, but the weight of collective approval presses down. You tell yourself it's not worth the tension, that maybe you're overthinking. But in that moment, you're not just avoiding conflict, you're surrendering your voice to the comfort of conformity. This surrender may seem small, but repeated over years, it becomes a habit, and habits shape who you are. And here lies the quiet danger. The more you live within systems designed to reward obedience and punish dissent, the less you notice when your own capacity for independent thought begins to fade. It's not that you lose the ability, it's that you stop exercising it. The cost of that loss is not only personal, but collective. When a society stops asking why, it becomes easy to steer, easy to divide, and easy to distract. Those in control know this well, which is why the design of these systems is not an accident, but a strategy. The question is, what happens if you decide not to play along? What happens if, in a room full of nodding heads, you're the one who dares to ask, why are we doing it this way? That single act may not dismantle the system, but it will reclaim something vital, your role as an active participant in your own life, rather than a passive passenger on a path laid out by someone else. And yet, even when you reclaim that role, there is another force working quietly, constantly, to pull your hands from the wheel, the flood of information that engulfs your attention every day. Daniel Kahneman, in Thinking, Fast and Slow, describes the two modes of thought that shape how you navigate reality. System 1 is quick, intuitive, and emotional. It jumps to conclusions, reads the room in an instant, and conserves mental energy. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and analytical. It examines, questions, and works through complexity. System 1 is the autopilot. System 2 is the manual controls. But here's the problem. In a world drowning in notifications, headlines, messages, and breaking news, your brain leans on System 1 far more than it should, simply because it's faster and less exhausting. This is where information overload reshapes how you think. The more input you face, the more tempting it becomes to take mental shortcuts. You start relying on social cues, likes, shares, trending topics, rather than verifying truth for yourself. Fromm would call this a form of psychological escape, avoiding the effort of deep thought in exchange for the comfort of ready-made answers. It feels efficient, even smart in the moment, but over time, it dulls your ability to engage with complexity. Think about how often you skim an article's headline and decide you already know the story, or how quickly you form an opinion after glancing at a viral post without reading the full context. Social media is built to encourage this. Platforms feed you an endless scroll of bite-sized stimuli, each demanding an instant reaction before your mind has time to slow down. You are rewarded for speed, for the immediacy of your response, not for the depth of your reflection. This creates what could be called a reaction culture instead of a reflection culture. In a reaction culture, the question is not, "Is this true?" but, "How do I feel about this right now?" And "Will others approve of my response?" The shift may seem subtle, but it is profound. It moves your decision-making away from evidence and toward emotional resonance. What feels right rather than what is right. And once emotional validation becomes the compass, you're no longer navigating toward truth, but toward belonging. This is dangerous, not because emotion has no place in thought, but because unchecked emotion, amplified by the speed of digital exchange, bypasses reason entirely. In that state, it's easy to be manipulated. A well-crafted headline, an image without context, a repeated claim, these can plant ideas in your mind without your conscious consent. You absorb them as truths, not because you've confirmed them, but because they feel familiar. Familiarity, Kahneman notes, is a powerful shortcut your brain uses to conserve energy. Fromm would warn that in surrendering to these shortcuts, you risk becoming a passive vessel for ideas chosen by others. The cost is more than misinformation. It is the erosion of your capacity to think independently. Picture this. You're scrolling late at night, half distracted, and you come across a claim about a political decision, a health risk, or a cultural controversy. You react instantly, anger, agreement, fear, before you've read a single source. You might even share it, adding your voice to the chorus. In that moment, your mind is not evaluating. It is echoing. And the more this pattern repeats, the less space you leave for System 2 to step in and ask the slower, harder questions. The irony is that in the age of infinite information, we are at greater risk of intellectual shallowness than ever before. Overload doesn't just tire you, it rewires your habits of thought. The challenge, then, is to pause long enough to notice when you are on autopilot. Ask yourself, how much time do I actually spend analyzing an idea compared to the time I spend reacting to it? This question is not a test. It is a mirror. In its reflection, you may see the gap between the thinker you believe yourself to be and the patterns you've been living. Closing that gap requires intention and the courage to let silence stretch between stimulus and response, so that thought can take root before reaction takes over. But silence is not easy to hold when the world around you is full of voices urging you to agree. to join in, to prove your belonging. This is where the pressure of consensus becomes one of the most powerful forces shaping your mind. Not through open coercion, but through the subtle, persistent pull of the group. Irving Janis called this phenomenon groupthink, when the desire for harmony within a group outweighs the desire for truth, leading to flawed or irrational decisions. In groupthink, dissent is quietly discouraged, even without explicit rules. You begin to censor yourself before speaking, filtering out thoughts that might disrupt the prevailing agreement. Evidence that contradicts the majority view is brushed aside, and disagreement starts to feel not only uncomfortable, but somehow wrong. The consensus itself becomes a symbol of correctness, even if it is built on fragile ground. Erich Fromm approached this from another angle, suggesting that human beings fear isolation more than they fear being wrong. Belonging offers a sense of security, and that security can feel worth the price of surrendering independent thought. This is a form of escape from freedom, giving up the responsibility of thinking for yourself so you can blend into the safety of the herd. It is not always a conscious choice. You might tell yourself you are simply being polite, pragmatic, or cooperative. But over time, the line between cooperation and conformity blurs until the act of questioning feels almost like betrayal. You see this dynamic vividly in the digital world. On social media, trends become modern campfires around which people gather. A post amasses thousands of likes and shares, and the sheer weight of that approval creates an unspoken pressure. This many people agree, so it must be right. Rarely do we pause to ask whether the crowd's judgment is informed or if it is simply momentum in motion. Platforms amplify this momentum, rewarding content that aligns with the majority sentiment and burying what challenges it. In such a space, groupthink thrives, not because people are unintelligent, but because the structure itself rewards agreement over accuracy. In the workplace, the stakes are different, but just as real. Imagine sitting in a meeting where a decision is being finalized. You know the plan has flaws. You've spotted potential risks others have missed. But as you look around, every head is nodding. The leader is smiling, the atmosphere feels settled, and speaking up would shatter that fragile harmony. You tell yourself it's not worth the friction, that maybe you're the one who's mistaken. So you stay quiet. The decision goes forward, and later, when problems emerge, you feel a mix of frustration and guilt. This is how groupthink operates. Not by silencing you outright, but by making you silence yourself. Fromm would say that in such moments, you're trading authenticity for acceptance. And while that trade may protect you from immediate discomfort, it slowly weakens the muscle of independent thought. The more often you avoid speaking against the grain, the harder it becomes to even think against it. Over time, you adapt to the group's logic until your own reasoning feels like an echo of the collective voice. This is not just a personal loss. It is a collective vulnerability. A group that cannot tolerate dissent is a group that cannot correct its own mistakes. History offers countless examples, from failed corporate ventures to political disasters, where the absence of honest challenge led to avoidable collapse. And yet, the instinct to belong is so strong that even knowing this risk, people often choose the comfort of consensus over the uncertainty of standing alone. The question then becomes deeply personal. In a room where every hand is raised, would you keep yours down if your mind told you the answer was different? Would you dare to be the lone voice, not out of defiance, but out of commitment to truth? In the moment, it may feel small, even futile, but every refusal to conform blindly is a defense against the quiet erosion of your freedom to think. That defense begins not in the noise of the crowd, but in the stillness within you, the place where your mind remains your own, no matter how loud the chorus around you grows. But holding on to that stillness is becoming harder in a world that fragments your attention into pieces. Marianne Wolfe, a cognitive neuroscientist, has shown how the brain's plasticity means it adapts to the way you use it. Deep reading, the slow, immersive engagement with complex text, trains the mind to analyze, to connect ideas across time and context, to build layers of meaning. Yet the modern habit of skimming headlines, jumping between browser tabs, and consuming short bursts of text has rewired our neural pathways. What once felt natural, the sustained focus needed to follow a nuanced argument, now feels like work your mind resists. Fromm would call this the erosion of inner quiet, the mental stillness that allows independent thought to form. Without that stillness, your mind becomes a relay point for fragmented impressions rather than a workshop for building understanding. Each notification, each flicker of a screen, interrupts the thread of thought before it can deepen. In this scattered state, critical thinking becomes not only difficult but uncomfortable. You begin to prefer the quick hit of a new piece of information over the patient unfolding of insight. In the digital environment, speed is rewarded. Platforms encourage you to respond instantly, react to a post, comment in real time, move on to the next thing. Slowness is treated as hesitation, and hesitation is punished by irrelevance. The result is a mental economy where value is placed on immediacy, not accuracy, on certainty, not curiosity. Over time, the habit of deep reading, which demands patience and attention, is replaced by the habit of shallow scanning. The consequences are subtle but profound. Without deep reading, you lose the ability to connect multiple perspectives into a coherent whole. Ideas are judged in isolation, stripped from the context that gives them nuance. The world collapses into a series of binary choices, right or wrong, for or against, because your mind no longer lingers long enough to explore the in-between. Fromm would see this as a dangerous simplification, one that leaves you vulnerable to manipulation. A person who cannot hold complexity is easily swayed by slogans and sound bites. Think about the last time you read an entire book from start to finish without distraction. For many, that memory is distant. And yet, the discipline of sustained attention is the very muscle that allows you to think beyond what's in front of you. It's the difference between reacting to the surface of an issue and seeing into its depths. In your daily life, you may feel the effects without realizing it. You start a long article and find yourself checking your phone halfway through. You listen to someone speak, and your mind wanders to an unrelated task. The inability to stay with a single thread of thought changes not only how you process information, but how you understand yourself. Reflection requires time. Time without interruption, time without the constant pull of the next stimulus. Reclaiming deep focus is not just a matter of discipline, it's a matter of freedom. When you choose to give your attention fully to one thing, you are reclaiming sovereignty over your mind. You are resisting the pull of an environment designed to keep you in perpetual distraction. And in doing so, you are also rebuilding the neural pathways that allow for genuine critical thought. So ask yourself, when was the last time you gave your mind the space to sink into an idea until it became something more than information, until it became understanding? The answer to that question will tell you more about your mental freedom than any headline or trending topic ever could. Yet even in that stillness, there is a subtle adversary that lives much closer than you think, your own ego. Erich Fromm observed that when a person fuses their sense of self with their beliefs, those beliefs stop being ideas to evaluate. They become part of their identity. Any challenge to them feels like a personal attack, and the mind's first impulse is not to examine, but to defend. Eckhart Tolle calls this the pain body, a collection of old emotional wounds and defensive reflexes that flare up when the ego feels threatened. In that state, you don't engage in dialogue. You react. You're not protecting truth. You're protecting the self-image you've built around what you believe. It's a reflex as ancient as survival itself. If the belief is me, then to threaten the belief is to threaten me. Carl Jung offers another lens, describing beliefs as part of the persona, the social mask you wear to navigate the world. The persona is not inherently false. It's a necessary layer that helps you function and belong, but it is not the whole of you. When a belief tied to your persona is challenged, it can feel like being stripped of your armor in public. The instinct is to cover yourself quickly, to fight back before you're exposed. This is why so many political, religious, or cultural debates degrade into personal attacks. It's rarely just about the idea. It's about the fragile scaffolding of identity that the idea is holding up. Fromm would say that when the ego drives the mind, the search for truth becomes secondary to the need to preserve the self's image. Instead of asking, "Is this true?" you ask, "How does this make me look?" That shift is small but devastating because it quietly moves you away from critical thinking and towards self-protection. The danger is that in defending the idea of yourself, you can become blind to reality. This plays out everywhere. On social media, a comment challenging your position can feel like an insult to your intelligence or morality, even when it's simply another perspective. In face-to-face conversations, hearing evidence against your long-held view can spark, not curiosity, but defensiveness, as though the other person is questioning your worth. This is the ego at work, equating belief with identity and identity with survival. The problem is, if you can't separate who you are from what you believe, you can't truly think freely. You will only ever think within the boundaries of what your ego can tolerate. And when the ego feels threatened, tolerance narrows. That's when critical thinking collapses into tribal loyalty, and dialogues becomes a battle to win rather than a path to understanding. The paradox is that the self you are defending is not even your whole self. Jung's deeper insight is that beyond the persona lies the self, your authentic, integrated being, which can hold multiple truths, admit error, and grow from it. But reaching that self requires loosening the ego's grip, allowing beliefs to be tools rather than shields. In practical terms, this means cultivating the ability to pause when you feel that defensive heat rise. Notice the tightening in your chest, the urge to interrupt, the spike of anger or dismissal. That moment is the ego sounding the alarm. And in that moment, you have a choice: to react in defense of your image or to lean into the discomfort and ask, what if they're right? What would I need to see differently? This isn't about surrendering your beliefs to every challenge. It's about not letting your ego decide for you before your mind has had a chance to think. Because the truth is, you cannot grow if you are more committed to being right than to being real. So I'll leave you with this. Are you willing to change a belief you've carried for years if the evidence shows it's wrong? Your answer may reveal more about your freedom than you realize. And if the answer is yes, then what you are practicing is more than intellectual skill. It is an act of liberation. Erich Fromm saw critical thinking as a quiet revolution, not one fought with banners and marches, but in the privacy of your own mind. It is the decision to look at reality without the filters that make it comfortable and to accept the full weight of owning your conclusions. This is why, for Fromm, critical thinking was inseparable from freedom itself. To think for yourself is to reclaim the authorship of your life. Socrates said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." This is not a statement of defeat, but of humility, a readiness to release the illusion of certainty and open yourself to what is. When you accept that you may be wrong, you create the conditions for growth. You stop defending the walls of a fortress and start exploring the landscape beyond them. This humility is not passive. It is the foundation of intellectual courage. Carl Jung offered a parallel truth. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Critical thinking is one of the most direct ways to bring light into that darkness. It forces you to see not just the flaws in the world, but the blind spots in yourself, the biases, the fears, the unexamined loyalties. It is uncomfortable work because it dismantles illusions you may have built your identity upon. But without it, you're not living in freedom. You are living inside a narrative someone else has authored. In a world of constant noise, keeping your critical faculties sharp is no longer just a personal preference, it is a social responsibility. The person who can think independently becomes a point of stillness in the storm, someone others can navigate by. You become not just a consumer of ideas, but a custodian of truth, however incomplete and evolving that truth may be. This role is demanding. It requires resisting the pull of easy outrage, refusing the comfort of herd certainty, and stepping back far enough to see the whole picture when everyone else is staring at a fragment. In practical terms, this means questioning the premise of every argument before you choose a side, looking for the evidence that would disprove your position rather than only the evidence that supports it, and staying alert to the subtle ways emotion can hijack reason. It means refusing to share an article just because it confirms your worldview and resisting the reflex to label someone as enemy just because they challenge your ideas. The liberation in this is not abstract. You feel it in the space that opens between stimulus and response. You feel it in the relief of no longer needing to be right at all costs, and in the strength of standing on convictions you have tested and chosen for yourself. You feel it when you realize you can listen to an opposing view without fear that your identity will shatter, because your sense of self no longer depends on the fragile scaffolding of unexamined beliefs. Fromm would tell you that in this state, freedom is no longer something granted by governments or guaranteed by laws. It is something you inhabit. It is woven into the way you meet the world each day, in the questions you dare to ask and the truths you are willing to face. Socrates would say you have learned to live with the awareness that you will never know everything, and that this is not a limitation, but a source of clarity. Jung would add that by making the darkness conscious, you have expanded not only your mind, but your humanity. So ask yourself, in this age of infinite noise, do you want to be the one who runs toward the loudest voice, or the one who stands in stillness long enough to hear the truth? Your answer will not only shape your mind, it will shape the world around you. Freedom, as Carl Jung and Erich Fromm remind us, is not given. It is claimed in the quiet, persistent act of thinking for yourself. We've explored how fear of independent thought, systems built to suppress dissent, information overload, herd mentality, the loss of deep reading, and the ego's attachment to beliefs all shape the way we see, and often avoid, the truth. Critical thinking is not just an intellectual exercise, it is self-awareness, psychology in motion, the courage to face your own shadow and still choose clarity over comfort. If you take one thing from this, let it be this: each day, pause before reacting. Take one breath, ask one honest question, and look for the truth beneath the noise. This single habit will help you overcome emotional reactivity, resist mental slavery psychology, and escape groupthink. In time, you'll find that no one can control you, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Your mind is the last frontier of your freedom. Protect it with the same care you would give your life, because in many ways, it is your life. The fear of freedom fades when you practice it daily. The reward is not just inner peace, but the ability to connect more deeply with others, because you meet them as your true self, not the mask society hands you. I'd love to hear your own story. When was the last time you challenged a belief and grew because of it? Share it in the comments. I read every one. And if this resonated with you, subscribe for more reflections on self-awareness, critical thinking, and emotional mastery, so we can keep exploring this path together.